All right,
get us going here? Or
let's get
I
going.
see people are still coming in, but we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Drew Pullen with High Desert Traffic. Welcome to the Jackalope Roads and Highways Interface session. We are dubbing this the Meeting of the Minds. Sorry to disappoint anybody who thought Megamind would be attending, but he will not. This session is scheduled for an hour and a half, and you'll be presenting Joe Wilkinson, Susie Ford, and myself. If you cannot see or hear me, please let me know now. And remember, we are being recorded, so if you ate something that doesn't agree with your stomach, the mute button is your friend. So let's get into this. So some of the topics that we're going to cover today regarding the interface is the user level for our RNH interface. We started looking back in March to see how much interest was out there. With Esri Roads and Highways, Esri has been around since like '69, I believe. But within the last 5 years or so, there's been a stronger push for Roads and Highways. So we're going to also talk about the HDT business specifications UI approach, and that's going to be getting into kind of how we're capturing and documenting and designing. The proof of concept status will be covered by Joe, and so will the proposed Jackalope interface and the interface timing considerations, and we'll also be talking about the next steps regarding the UI. So activities and participants, the journey so far. We cast the net to see how much interest was out there again in March, I believe was the first email via the quarterly Jackalope group email, and April and May we did some more follow-ups, but then after that we started paring down to this core group that you see to the right, and we started meeting with states individually or a couple states at a time, or just this core group here to move forward. The goal has been to capture and document and create a proposed workflow to help Joe work on the proof of concept. So right now, I think Idaho and Utah are pretty much ready to rock. I think Nevada is there as well. Wyoming sounds like they're on the cusp of procuring roads and highways, and they'll be ready to go. And Minnesota also has roads and highways. I believe all of them do except for Wyoming, but they are not using it for their traffic. There might have been some issues with updating, I believe. Might have been mentioned back in 2017 when we were up there. I'm not sure if any UDOT, Idaho, Nevada, or Wyoming or Minnesota would like to give a brief overview of where they are with roads and highways now. I'll open it up for you guys if you'd like.
Yeah, this is Margaret with Idaho, and we've been fully implemented with roads and highways for about a little over, about 2.5 years now. And when we decided that roads and highways was going to be our official source of location. So while Jackalope may be our official source of our traffic counts and our traffic statistics, roads and highways is where we store all of our location information. And yeah, so we've set up everything from what we need for HPMS and other things inside roads and highways. Although based on some of the things we've been hearing, we're actually maybe looking at switching where we get our K factors and D factors and how we do those a little bit. But in general, we've got our crash data. We've got our asset management is going online with roads and highways. That interface is going up actually this month. So I mean, we're fully becoming a roads and highways shop.
at UDOT, we've been probably working on implementing roads and highways for the last 2-3 years, and we just went live this year. Currently, I would say for the most part, we're very similar to where Idaho's at as far as the different groups involved, you know, our traffic and safety, our planning, our pavement group, as well as the traffic group. We're all pretty heavily invested into having one LRS shared among us using these tools and applications. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is Minnesota. So as Drew mentioned, Minnesota implemented roads and highways several years ago. And at the time, the traffic unit did participate as an internal registered event, which meant we lived inside the LRS as roadway changes were being made. We also did dual entry in our previous system, which was a feature class of line segments and points. And after about a year, we determined that it was just as much work for us to maintain the feature classes. So based on some difficulty we had with how the road edits were being done and our inability to keep track of dates, we decided to abandon roads and highways for now, wait and see what happens if it improves. And so we're still maintaining our feature classes. And then once a year for HPMS, I use a tool in GIS called Locate Features Along Routes to provide routes and measures of traffic data to our HPMS coordinator. In terms of other MnDOT systems, I think the only integrated system is the crash locations, and other systems are kind of operating like traffic, where they sit on the fringe and maybe consume the measures once or twice a year.
Great, thank you. Chris, Nevada, I don't know if you wanted to talk about maybe how you guys have roads and highways, but it's kind of a really manual process right now.
Yeah, our roads and highways is operational now, but the traffic data is not in there yet. So they're still working on getting the regular traffic data in there. HPMS data is in there already, but it is a manual process to update. So we will be working on that in the next couple months.
Cool. Thanks, guys. All right. If anybody has anything else to add, there'll be some time later, and I think I can turn it over to Susie.
Okay. Am I presenter now? I'm just going to cancel out of there. Am I able to use Drew's slides, or do I have to pull mine up?
You can use mine.
I don't. Oh.
Yeah, if he just shares his screen and gives you mouse and keyboard, then you can just click through.
Yes. Okay, Drew, can you give me mouse and keyboard?
Yep.
Okay. And what I'm going to mention, and I don't know if you guys were aware, but you can resize your windows. So you can shrink Joe, me, and Drew up and make us smaller and make the presentation larger. And I'm mentioning that because there are going to be some slides that I'm sharing where it's looking sort of small. And all you do is need to grab, there's a horizontal too, and if you're able to do that, then it'll be easier to see. Hey, Drew, did you give me control yet?
Yep.
Okay, let me just click on the slide. Oh, yes, he did. Look at that. I went through these like super quick. I'm trying to go back one, but.
Here, let me,
Yeah. Go back another one, Drew. Go all the way and go back versus forward. There we go. So maybe we'll leave you in control and we won't let me control it. So
teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, it's a team. It's a team, you guys. So, unified modeling language, I don't know if you've heard the term, you might have heard of it as UML, but it's a standard visual modeling language that's used in software development, and it's been around for, seriously, it's been around for a couple of decades. And UML diagrams and documentations are a great communication tool to use between the business users and the technical team to really capture and document your business specifications, your requirements, and it really helps to flesh out, as you can see here, where they talk about flaws and errors and gaps in your workflow. And it's great when you're working on really large or complicated systems. And you'll see later on in a couple of slides some examples for how that picture, which is worth 1,000 words, is really helping to anchor and focus our teams as we're moving forward in the design specifications for roads and highways. There are some common UML diagrams, and I think some of you have heard of them before. You've heard them mentioned even during this past couple of days. We talk about use cases, and we're going to break that down for you in the next couple of slides. And then we'll talk about use case narratives, in addition to that, activity diagrams. So HTT has used these design techniques on a lot of their projects, and I think some of you are familiar with some of the terminology, some of you aren't, and so we're going to try to bring the whole group together and we'll walk through a couple of things. Drew, you want to advance? Yep, thank you. So use case diagramming, and this was again mentioned before. It's a high level view. It's not down into the detail, but it's a high level view of the events of the system and of some of their flow. And it's based on interactions and relationships between individual use cases. So some components or some pieces of a use case, and you will see this on the next slide. The first one is the actor, and you're going to see a little stick figure there, and it's a person or a system that initiates the event. And an example is of the person would be like a traffic coordinator. The system could be Jackalope or Roads and Highway. Then you'll see a rectangle, which is called system boundary. And then that sort of encapsulates all the different use cases associated to that function, that you can see it all in one. And it sort of gives you the scope, how big is big. And then lastly is the use case itself, which is represented by an oval. And during our talks, I think Nicholas called it a bubble. So you might look at it as an oval or a bubble. And the narrative associated to that use case will really break down all the actions that occur in that use case. So individually, it all makes sense. Here's the components of a use case. And then we're going to try to bring it all together. Next slide, please, Drew. And if you can click one more click for me. This is where you may need to try to make your screen as large as you can. This is sort of one of our more complex use cases that we've been working on. And first thing you'll notice are some of the pieces that we've talked about. You're going to see the actors or the stick figures there. And then you're also going to see the rectangle, which is the system boundary. That's okay. In addition to that, you're going to see, click for me, thank you. You're going to see the use cases within this use case diagram. And I want to mention that typically you won't see this many use cases within the boundary, but we did this so that HDT could build a better understanding between what's going on in roads and highways and that interface that really needs to take place if Jackalope is going to capture and get some of the roads and highway changes that occur. The other thing to note is you're going to see purple, people, which will represent Jackalope, and the use case is purple, is Jackalope. You're going to see green, which is used to represent roads and highways. And then you're going to see a dashed line. Can everybody see that dashed line there? Because that line's really important. And I'm just checking my chat window to see that everybody can see all the pieces and that you can see the line. Thank you. I see a couple of yeses filtering. Appreciate the feedback. That dashed line really represents, as you can see, through the color coding above the line, which we'll refer to it, or below the line. Everything above the line is roads and highways. It's use cases in roads and highways. It's your activities that are triggered, your events, the actors, meaning the people, the GIS editors, roads and highways. All that interaction is happening above the line with a traffic coordinator. Below the line is where the handshake takes place, that interface that Joe will be talking about how Jackalope is going to be able to accept the changes that are coming through. You're going to see these darker greens, and I'm just wanted to mention it because these darker greens are some event behaviors in roads and highways. And I want to say at this point, I don't believe so far with the discussions that we've had that Jackalope or the High Desert team has to fully understand how you will be interfacing with those use cases, but we may need to understand when we start talking about some updates. So they've been included in here, but I would say not critical. So everything above the line is your activity with roads and highways. Everything below is with Jackalope. You'll note it's heavily the use cases are in roads and highways. You're seeing a lot of flow up here. And look at, you're seeing a more simplified use cases down to Jackalope. Not that Joe's job is easy. It's just that we have fewer use cases above there. Drew, would you hit it one more time for me, please? Okay, so with each state, we are beginning to take notes, just like when you were sharing Margaret Nicholas, Christy, and Chris Wright, and then we will with you, Chad, also when you get roads and highways in and you're closer to understanding how your traffic data unit is going to be interfacing with roads and highways, we've taken some additional notes. So the first thing is, and Nicholas did mention, UDOT's official LRS is roads and highways. Some of the agencies have a different LRS, or they have a LRS plus roads and highways, and they're in the stages of being able to make that transfer, which I think some of the agencies who have roads and highways are recognizing. We're hearing, oh, it's been in 2 years. It's been in more than 2 years, and we're still in the process of building and putting additional business areas in roads and highways. So kudos to the ones who have been able to do it, or some of the other ones who are using like XOR or Agile Assets. It's a huge feat to bring it in, let alone interface it with other areas. Nevada mentioned they already have HPMS in there, and they're really looking at how they're going to leverage it for their traffic data unit. So that's a note for UDOT, is it's their official LRS. Secondly, and you'll notice there's a relationship. I try to put like a 1, and you'll see 1 to the use case. Number 2 is referencing the traffic segment layer, where it's getting ready to come down into Jackalope. And that traffic segment layer is maintained by the traffic coordinator. So the purple guy on the left, you'll see an arrow going into there. And there are no feature classes in this layer. Next will be number 3. And that's the new interface that we'll be working on. and it's going to synchronize all the traffic related data changes from roads and highways into Jackalope. And the fourth one is going to be a new UI in Jackalope, and how traffic coordinators are going to be able to be notified of changes that are occurring. Right now, the proposal is to use the Jackalope alert module, and those who are authorized to be able to view the changes that occurred will be able to see that in that module. So any questions for me right now? Okay, we're doing good.
All right, I will take over. No, this is not an elaborate game of hangman where nobody could guess a letter. But now that everybody's looking at the diagram, just make a note at number 4, the review feature class update bubble or oval, because we'll be talking about that in the next slide here. So I'm going to talk about use case narratives really quick. Once the picture is captured, next is the use case narrative, and this is where things really get drilled down. So we've identified 6 here. We completed 5 of the 6 use case narratives. And again, these are draft narratives, and it's a work in progress. So nothing set in stone, but we've got, also anything with the asterisk is incompleted or outstanding tasks, and anything in black 1 through 3 is going to be done in roads and highways, and anything in purple 4 through 6 will be done in Jackalope. Add, update, delete, retire under number 1 in the ALRS, which is Utah's A stands for awesome. This is going to be done anticipated being done in roads and highways, and then trickling down and affecting Jackalope. So that's why it's purple, but it's still up in the black up there. So each oval will have its own use case narrative. It's a one-to-one relationship. And again, this is where you're going to really be able to drill things out, and it really solidifies the proposed agreement between the users and the developers. So this is what one looks like, and again, this is going to be for that review feature class update bubble from the previous slide or oval. And again, right now we're looking at number 5 here as far as review feature class updates. So it's kind of self-explanatory, but we'll still go over it. I think there's some great information here just to give you guys an overview, especially if this is unfamiliar to you. This is just what it looks like. So this is, again, the review feature class update, and the subject area is maintaining the traffic segment layer and feature classes. The business event, or what triggers this, Jackalope alert window, and the Jackalope analysis and storage engine software will be used to alert the coordinator that there's a change. The actors here, again, the actors can be a person or a system, and we have the traffic count coordinator and the Jackalope system. And then the use case overview. This is just kind of, overall scope of what's going on and what you're expecting. And again, we're expecting to maintain these values here. Some of the values in roads and highways that will come down to Jackalope. Some of the preconditions and for the interface. Make this bigger so I hope everybody can see this okay. It's kind of small, but
It is sort of small, but I can tilt my eyeglasses.
Okay. So it's just how things are going to communicate. Termination outcome. Oopsies. Traffic segment layer will match Jackalope from to mileage and route ID. Roads and highways feature class updates will match Jackalope site attributes. Condition affecting the termination outcome. Is there any situation that would affect this review? Again, work in progress. The use case description. This is kind of a step-by-step where you'll log into Jackalope, check that alert module to see if there have been any edits or any notifications Review the proposed feature class change in the new Jackalope UI, and then click approve. So that's kind of what it would actually look like going through the motions. So use case associations, maintain traffic segment layer, update Jackalope site attributes, update roads and highways feature class, traceability too, and that's like synchronizing the systems and other documentation or materials, and then the input your data sources and output data sources. So this would be the feature class updates from roads and highways. Not sure if there'd be another one. And then the output would be updated Jackalope site records. That's the site attribute values and site record effective date. I'm going to go back really quick. And if you look at number 6 here in Jackalope, the update site attribute, that's actually happening now in Jackalope, but we put it here because it might be affected if number 1, the add, update, delete, retire is done in roads and highways. That could be changed. That process could be changed. So we added it there, but it is something that's there already. All right, I will turn it over to Susie. Thank you.
Okay, so trying to cement some of these concepts and then bring them all together. So we've been working with the groups and then the subset of groups that Drew mentioned earlier, and in part trying to document and capture and diagram and try to figure out what this interface means. And one of the things that was new to me was talking about some of the roads and highways feature layers and then some of their feature classes, etc. And it was really helpful when the agency started providing us with some examples of this. And I thought it would be worthwhile to share with you as you start thinking about not even using the terms that we're using, but to familiarize yourself with, oh gosh, you know, for roads and highways, Minnesota, Darren and Christy were using terms I wasn't familiar with. The internal registered event, or are you an external registered event? Familiar with some of you folks, but not to me. But so learning a lot through this process and really interesting, but it is quite complicated. So if you're not grasping it 100% and you're saying, wow, you know, Melissa made a comment and said, hey, I'm glad some of you guys are going to be, you know, sort of where I'm at in a similar environment. They're using XOR and it's using these layers and, you know, having a location referencing system and then dealing with your traffic world. So some examples of UDOT layers, and I believe they're similar to Idaho also, some of the fields. So some may be the same, some may be different, but how we're going to link when you make a feature class change in roads and highways to Jackalope is by these layers. And on the left, you're going to see some. Now I'm moving my chat window down, so if someone chats, you guys just let me know, and I'll stop. But there are roads and highways feature layers. You're going to be familiar with like functional class because we know functional class is in Jackalope, traffic segment, NHS, your county value, municipality. Utah has some a regional layer, and then station book is Idaho's. And I haven't forgotten you, Nevada. I'm going to bring you up. You get your own slide. So these UDOT layers, we asked the group to go through and color code and say, hey, tell me what are some of the fields in UDOT on your layers that you feel are important when a change is being made to an attribute. And the reason is we need to be able to pair or cross-reference fields in your roads and highways layers to site attributes in Jackalope. So Nicholas went through, and I think, Nicholas, some of those yellow are mine because I wasn't sure and I was guessing at that point. And he highlighted and said, hey, you know, and this is where, Drew, I am going to have to look where you guys can help me. He said, I think the from and to date's important, the year record, the established date. So he highlighted the red ones And on the next slide, you'll see like functional class on this layer. So when the functional class is being changed in roads and highways, and you think about that process flow in that use case, it's coming from the green world, roads and highways, cascading and filtering down into that yellow use case, which is where the interface is going to be built and synchronizing the two systems into the review. So functional class is not an attribute that the business users in traffic maintain. They're not the authoritative source. The authoritative source for functional class may be your planning unit, maybe some other work area in your agency. So when that change is made, it's going to come in from roads and highways. If you are going to be a roads and highways user using this interface, that change will be made in roads and highways and filtered down to us, we're hoping in a very automated way. And then you will be alerted in the Jackalope window saying, hey, look, there was a change in roads and highways, you should review it. Taking a step back, we haven't defined all that detail yet. It really is, as Drew mentioned, a work in progress. So the next one was the traffic segment layer fields, and then you'll see the third column is your NHS layer fields, and you see NHS highlighted, meaning that's going to be the field that we are going to pull from this layer file. Our next step was saying, hey guys, now that we're getting more familiar with your layers in roads and highways, we want you to cross-reference those feature classes, county code, functional class, etc., to what it is in Jackalope. Well, pat on the back, Chris, right? Chris jumped to that, and what he provided us, yeah, yay, Chris. You'll see in the first column is fields he's identified to date that in Jackalope he feels are going to be the equivalent to roads and highways. So he's mapped that out for us. And I thought it was really worthwhile to share, because as you're seeing sort of the incremental steps that we're going through, trying to map out the use cases, trying to understand the complexity of roads and highways interface to Jackalope. And that use case diagram that we shared, it's probably our 9th iteration, I just must say. So this is very much so an iterative process. Then we said, hey, anchor us, tell us what are some of your layer files and what are some of the attributes you feel that are going to filter down. Now we need to cross-reference that to what's in Jackalope. And so what you'll see is a list of fields in Jackalope like county, functional class, route name, your rural urban codes, etc. And then Chris has put there the layer file name from Jackalope. And this is an example then of the first one, county, and then the county name. And then this is his, and I think, Chris, I wanted to ask, I believe this would be a full, is this the full list of it? He's color-coded in yellow what would be coming in from roads and highways. So Joe would be able to say, oh, county code from statewide routes is what's going to be related to the site attribute county. But Drew, if you could flip back 2 more slides to the red one, please note that you see like object ID, event, route, and you see these items in here, and it seems like it's a little shorter. So I'm thinking that agencies are define some of these.
We missed that last part.
Oh, sorry about that. So I guess what I'm asking Chris is, when he looks at these items here, I see like object ID, but I didn't see like from and to date or year or exchanged, are the agents getting the
1 second. It looks like someone who's calling in on the phone needs to mute themselves. Okay. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Susie.
Oh, okay. So I guess the question was maybe not this. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. This might be like some of you might have heard this like 5 times now, so I apologize. But I was looking and comparing the layer file between UDOT, what we had, and Nevada's, and I was curious if agencies are able to define these layer elements, or are they sort of provided and that's done and then sort of the traffic world gets these? That was my question.
Some are predefined by roads and highways, like event ID, route ID from measure to measure, and then you can add on additional ones that are business defined.
Yeah, from date to date, some of those system capture date, those are all predefined. They're part of a standard installation.
Okay, so if I look at those from date to date, and then Drew, take us to Chris's, to Nevada, right there. Oh, I see. Okay, so we have object ID from to route ID, create. Are they all standard naming conventions then for each of these layers?
Yeah, for our tables, they are.
Okay, okay. So this is looking at sort of what the next step we will be doing with Utah, and then with Idaho, and then Chad with you when you come on board, looking at your layers and looking at which fields we think will be filtering down. And I'm going to take you back in terms of looking at and thinking about when Drew talked about the add, delete, and update use cases. That potentially is living in the roads and highways world, but will be filtering down into Jackalope. And so when we think about that, that's some of the things that we need to relate to better understand what attributes are being changed. So I think, any questions about this so far? Well, we must be doing an awful good job, Drew. They're all on board, so I'm ready. Keep going.
Did we lose? Oh,
We did. I lost your audio, so I found if I flip my video in and out, it brings it back in.
okay. I'm talking to the slide.
Yes.
Excellent. We got it together here.
If you want me to, I can, but
No, that's fine. That's fine. So, oh, thank you, Drew. You moved it from right to left to right. That's awesome. So yeah, basically, from a technology standpoint, this diagram shows the flow of information. And so on the left there, we have roads and highways, making traffic segment network changes, and these are the create, change, or delete events that might occur, feature class edits, basically any of the changes that you make in roads and highways gets thrown into the geo database there. And then that kind of goes into the kind of the ether of the Esri roads and highways map. I think it's called the map server REST endpoint there. And I'm skipping some steps, and this is where the workflow manager and people that are used to roads and highways, this is where all that the little dot there encompasses all the work that you're doing to actually see all this stuff through and make sure all of the. Pardon me?
Magic.
magic, hey, you got it. All of that magic is happening in those dotted lines there. And so once it gets to the Esri Roads and Highways API, this is a clean, you've already filtered out the stuff that you don't want to deal with, and you've already made the changes that you need to make, and it's sitting out there ready for us to consume in the Esri Roads and Highways map server REST endpoint. And once it's out there, we are going to have various tools that will hopefully make this real time, that will trigger our HDT's RDI, which is the remote database interface, will be notified of these changes and will be able to consume those changes. Part of that RDI box there will include sort of a gatekeeping function. Drew was talking about that earlier with the alerts. So for those people that use I think the only alert we have right now is the new user alert. So if you frequently create new users, or you have other people, you give other people the ability to create users, administrators will see an alert. And that's the leftmost button in Jackalope that tells them something interesting happened. And that mechanism is going to be used here for when something interesting happens in Esri. And so the kind of the gatekeepers of the Esri Roads and Highways world will see that alert and be able to approve it. And then the data keeps going down that line here, which is the traffic segment network changes get approved and into the Jackalope database there. And then we're going to have various tools, various Jackalope functions that'll make managing that information easier in the Jackalope product itself, and that's part of the alerts that I'm talking about, as well as other ways to do like ad hoc reporting of how is the Jackalope database looking compared to the Roads and Highways database. Sometimes things look through the cracks, so we'll be able to do like synchronization reports and make sure all that looks good. And then once a year or as required, we will push this data or from the public database, push this data back into the Esri database. What I'm talking about with data there are the statistics, the annual statistics, the HPMS statistics, anything that Roads and Highways may be interested in with regards to displaying it to the outside world will then get pushed into the Esri Roads and Highways database. So it's a full circle. We're going to be sucking in real-time site changes, which may be a feature class change, it may be a layer, any number of those changes there on the left. That site information is going to be coming in real time into Jackalope, and then on an ad hoc data basis, that traffic statistics will be pushed from Jackalope, from the public database, into Esri Roads and Highways. The green toolbox there, the green ITG toolbox, is a set of tools that Margaret's team has written to do a lot of this work already. She has a really kind of a cool, robust system, and Vicky showed it to us one day for managing this already. And we might try to steal some of that as we progress. But that green box right there is Idaho's solution to the that last little line that's there right now, the one that pushes from the public database into the Esri Roads and Highways database. Okay. So I'm actually let's keep this here for now. So the first step in doing this for us is to do a proof of concept. And what a proof of concept is it's kind of the bare bones, okay, let's just see if this will work at all kind of task. And so it's not going to be all of the cool things that are going to be there. It's not going to have the alerts. It's not going to have some of the background things. It's basically going to be the most minimum tasks possible just to see if the technologies work. And my hope was to have a proof of concept done today, but the proof of concept did its job and found a technology challenge. And I'll get into the details in a little bit, but the proof of concept is stalled at the moment because like I said, it did its job. It found a problem and we need to deal with it. So let me talk about what the proof of concept will be when it's finally done. A couple slides ago, I think Susie was talking to the one more, Drew, right here. The cross, go back to the one year. Yep, this cross-reference here. So the ability to say, okay, county in Jackalope refers to, rhwork.dbo.statewide routes.county code. That information was part of what we wanted to have in the proof of concept so that we could make it work kind of seamlessly and get that done. And I'm going to talk to you about how that works in a second. And I just see we have some questions, so give me one second. Darren from Minnesota asks, is it going to pick out the specific sites that fall within the to and from measure? Or are you going to get an alert that tells route X was edited? That's a good question, Darren. I think it's going to be at the site level. The answer is it'll probably be a little bit of both because we're also going to be trying to suck in section information too. But the idea is that you'll get an alert for every site change and maybe also for the section. That's still something we haven't ironed out yet for sure. But absolutely for every site change that falls within the from and to measures will be something that you, gatekeeper, should deal with. Oh, and Susie answered his question. Yes, that's what I said, Susie. We're still working on it. We don't know for sure yet, but almost certainly sites will be there and probably the section too, but we'll see. And so the cross-reference table here was one thing we wanted to implement in the proof of concept just so that we had something to work with so that we knew what fields we were going to get. As well as we were just, can you go back, Drew, to the proof of concept slide? One more, yep. As well as just a super misspelled site sync button. So basically on the site screen, we'll have a sync button. You can press that and it's gonna synchronize information from roads and highways into Jackalope. So super simple. The metadata to give us, the information we need to have in order to connect to roads and highways, and then a sync button, which basically sucks that information over. That's all we wanted to do. Cool. All right. So let me share my screen. One second. Okay, you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk about what we are doing and what it'll eventually look like. The first thing is, let me make sure we didn't get logged out. Nope. The first thing is we wanted to make sure other people weren't disturbed by the changes that we're making. So we added a system variable that basically is the LRS type that we're communicating with. And currently the only type of LRS that will be involved in this process is roads and highways. So if this setting is set to roads and highways, then you're going to see the things that I'm showing you. If it's not set, then what I'm showing you will not show up on your screen. You don't have to worry that we're cluttering up some stuff. In addition, there's a roads and highways base URL, which is the way the map server works is there's a base URL and then you can construct queries based on that, what that looks like. So those are the two system parameters that need to be there. But again, you guys aren't going to see what I'm showing you unless this is set. Okay. And then we wanted to work on site metadata. And site metadata, again, is that cross-reference table. That's what says county in Jackalope is the whatever feature class column name in roads and highways. And just as a reminder of what site metadata is, when you go into Jackalope, and I actually don't know what state I'm in, this is my local development environment. So actually looks like Iowa. I recognize those station numbers. So for Iowa, they have these fields that are important to them: station number, ATR number, count type, section, township, I guess, city, county name, etc. They have a whole bunch of fields that they care about, and we have put those fields into the site metadata table, which allows it to be displayed correctly. This allows us to have every state have a different looking site UI, because every state has different things that they're interested in, right? Some people don't care about section, township, and so they're not going to have this sort of information. The way this looks, all of the columns and how these are QC'd and how they're displayed, that's all in the site metadata UI. And that's where we are going to make the cross-reference functionality work. Okay. So let's go into the site metadata, which is administrator site metadata. And here's all those columns. So let's, if you wanted to get ATR number from a particular place in roads and highways, you would double click on that and do that. I was playing with location text down here. And here's what the location text site metadata looks like. It's, it just gives some information about what it is. But then down here towards the bottom, there's a new section called roads and highways column information. And again, you won't see this unless that system parameter is set. And this gives information on how you're actually going to get that information. It's going to tell you who owns this information and where you're going to get it. So for people that have roads and highways enabled, they have two choices. They can have a column be from Jackalope, in which case that's the default behavior. That's the way it is now for everybody. If Jackalope owns a column, then people can edit it in Jackalope, they can delete stuff, they can do whatever they want to. That's fine. That's the way things work now. If roads and highways owns a column, that's where it gets a little bit different. So there's certain types of columns that we are going to allow for roads and highways. The first, and probably one of the most important, is the primary key column. And the primary key column is the column that allows you to say, this site in Jackalope points to this entity in roads and highways. So in Utah that we're working on, road name 1, which I can't remember what it's called, goes to a particular feature class in roads and highways, and that's where the link is. So you're gonna define, with our help, one of your columns to be the primary key, the thing that uniquely identifies a site, and where you can go through and actually be able to do things like sync up things. Like if you're missing a site in Jackalope that is in roads and highways, you're going to use this primary key to make that evaluation. We're probably going to get rid of feature class. That's what we're looking at now. Basically, probably the only other thing will be the ArcGIS REST service. If I click on this, we're going to get a nice little crash in the debugger back here. And this is where our proof of concept is doing its job and finding problems. When you click on the ArcGIS REST service, what it's going to do is it's going to go out and query your map server, and it's going to find all of the layers that you have access to. And because they are all available through the map server product from ESRI. And it'll list each of those layers down here in the next column. And then you'll be able to select a layer from that list. And then from there, you'll be able to select an individual field within that layer. And that will be the source of information for this field. There's another thing you can do, which is a post call function, which is, okay, you've got the field for roads and highways. Maybe that's not exactly what you want in Jackalope. Like, for example, well, in Iowa, for example, they have that 11-digit or 12-digit field. Maybe, I actually don't know this, but maybe like the last 3 digits means something special. You could do a post call function where you're just going to take everything except the last 3 digits and do something with that. And that's actually going to be the column that's in Jackalope, if that makes sense. And then there's a default site action, which is when this field changes, so if a roads and highways edit was made and this field changed, what do you want to do to the Jackalope site? Do you just want to update the existing site record, or do you want to create a new site split? One of the things we talked about in our meetings was most of the time people aren't going to want to create a new site split for a lot of the just informational changes, like the location text changed at all these sites, or they go and make a realignment to a route, and so 100 sites down the route all change. People didn't necessarily want to see 100 sites all of a sudden with new site splits with this new information. So you have control over whether you want a particular field to trigger a site split or just to update the existing site. So if you have 10 columns where roads and highways is the source, and all 10 of them have updated, if one of them has a create a new site split as their default site action, it'll create a new site split. Okay, I'm hoping that makes sense. Okay, and so this is how we're going to be implementing the cross-reference that Drew was showing on that other slide a second ago, where county and Jackalope points to all of this stuff in roads and highways. And this, the columns have been implemented. What's not implemented is this REST service, which is crashing because of a security problem, and that's the proof of concept. Our version of Java that we're using in Jackalope is not compatible with ESRI's map server security layer. They use a particular sort of cipher that was not supported until Java 8. So we are struggling right now to get the bare minimum as possible, just so that Jackalope can support this cipher, so that we can actually start performing these queries that we need to do. And once we've done that, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about before, where you'll be able to query the layers, you'll be able to pick the layer, you'll be able to pick the column. Okay. And then once you've done that to all of the columns that you're interested in allowing roads and highways to maintain, you will be able to go to site admin, site list, double click on a site, and two things will happen. First of all, you will no longer be able to edit the site, the information in Jackalope that is owned by roads and highways. So for example, I was messing with location text. This will not be changeable in Jackalope anymore, and we'll have a special, it'll say something to the effect of, owned by roads and highways or something like that. Just to make sure that roads and highways is the maintainer of this information, and we don't have two versions of the truth. The other thing is this button here will work. The sync from roads and highways button will work, and it'll go through all the site metadata columns that are owned by roads and highways, and it'll take all that information over and populate this site with the new information. So that's the bare bones proof of concept that we want to have. We want Nicholas to be able to make a change in his roads and highways network, press this button, and see that change show up in Jackalope. And that's just step one, obviously. That's not all of the functionality we want. Okay, so Christy was asking, will the version of roads and highways at each state impact if this would work, 10.7 versus ARC Pro? You're probably right, Christy. Margaret also has the roads and highways endpoint, and I didn't check that to see if it also has the same security problem, because it kind of, we've decided on Utah as being our proof of concept state, and we need to be able to get that to work. And if we can't, we haven't done what we need to do. So it's possible that depending on the map server software that your state has implemented, that the version 7 of Java would work. It's just not working with Utah's. So I don't know, Christine. I think you're probably right. And it might not even be different versions of roads and highways. It might be that you can configure the roads and highways map server differently. And so, you know, we could probably ask Nicholas to ask their people to see if they could make the security less secure. But this is a battle we have to fight anyway, and I'm going to be talking about this in the two sessions from now, the last session of the day. This is something that needs to happen anyway, so we're probably just going to climb this mountain right now. So that's the proof of concept that we're going to try to get implemented as quickly as possible. Again, we've got to overcome the security challenge. But once we do, that's the goal. You're going to be able to go into site metadata, make that cross-reference list of all the columns that you're interested in, come over here, press the sync from roads and highways button, and see that information just on a site-by-site basis. And obviously, that's not everything we're doing. That's just to make sure everything works. Nicholas says, I think I'll need some better wording on that to approach DTS. Not sure secure, or not sure secure to less secure will fly well. Yeah. IT people don't like that when you go, could you make your systems less secure so we can access it? Well, Nicholas, we need to, this has actually bitten us before. Wyoming had a similar situation. I don't know if Chad's in here, but we actually hit our heads against this last year, I think it was. It was the same sort of security. They also have an ESRI database, but we were able to eke our way around it in a way that we can't here. So this just needs to be addressed. It's something that has to happen. So we're going to make our products, we're going to upgrade here in a little bit. Yeah, and Chad says, and we are still hitting our heads. Security is a pain in the butt, I got to tell you. You know, everything has to be speaking the same language, and we've got every state that's different. It's fun. Okay, and that's the proof of concept. Susie or Drew, do you mind taking over?
Yep. Let me.
Drew's pulling up the next slide that we're going to do. As we've been working through the business specifications and requirements with that core group, we've identified 2 interface timings right now that are some potential issues. And I'm just doing a time check. We have 25 minutes, and so I think that should be adequate. The first one that we mentioned, and we'll share 2 of them, we're guessing there won't just be 2, that there will be more things and items that come out. But right now, the first consideration is what happens when a traffic count is taken and no traffic count site exists. I know it's happened in probably every single agency. You faced this before. It can happen when there's new construction or a subway division site is done and it's been added, but the line work isn't there. So either the site isn't there or the line work isn't there. How are we going to deal with uploading counts in Jackalope if no site exists and you interface with roads and highways? So we've come up with a proposed solution, and it's to assign a temporary ID. So it's a new function that will be in Jackalope. This is looking at the solution in a pictorial or a diagram way, which I find, for me, visually, it helps to pair with the words. So I think this version, mine is, it's sitting on top of it a little bit, but please note again, the color coding. The green is roads and highways, the purple is Jackalope. New step in the process is the darker purple, and then the existing step in Jackalope is the more transparent. So we're looking at these, what we termed one-offs. And so if the line work or the site doesn't exist in roads and highways, the user will create a temporary site ID. And then the process now is the same. The accounts can be loaded and then they will be processed. And then lastly, you need to reassociate these temporary sites to a permanent site. And that will be done once roads and highways line work and the site is created. So this gives you the picture of what it looks like. This is what we're thinking will work right. And again, we will be working through this in more detail. And then when we continue to do proof of concepts, we'll be looking at this as a solution to this first issue.
And the second timing issue we came up with was something probably everybody's a little bit familiar with, which is the traffic system end of year lockdown. So when you guys are going throughout the year, you're making, and this is general, this is not just roads and highways people, you're making changes to your LRS, you're adding roads, you're adding sites, you're doing all that fun stuff. And then at some point near the end of the year, someone says, okay, freeze. And you create a snapshot of the network that's going to be used for end of year processing, because you can't allow the network to be continually changing as you're trying to generate statistics for all of these sites on the network. And people have various ways of dealing with that. I mean, I know some people just have, you know, they'll create a shape file or something like that, and that'll be the official 2020 network for annual processing. And then that'll just get passed around between departments. You know, depending on what LRS you're using, there's probably different mechanisms for doing that. But with roads and highways, because they have this timeline feature, which allows you to view the network at any given time in the past. So I could say, well, what did the network look like on December 31st, 2019? And I can get a snapshot of what that looks like. We have a little bit more flexibility in how we deal with this freezing problem. We talked about this yesterday when I was talking about annual phase 4.7, I think it was. We just made up a number. And let me talk about it a little bit more now. So
also,
yeah,
Joe, Christy posted a question you might want to answer about the handshake.
Is the API handshake passing of a route and measure or the lat long stored in the Jackalope site? Right now it's neither, Christy. Right now, what we're implementing with Utah is we use the primary key, which is their station ID, as the initial call, which brings back basically kind of the measures. Does anybody know the term for the points? It's not. Maybe it is the route and measure. It's the thing that it's not a lat long, but it's two coordinates. I don't know if you're talking about, if you know what I'm talking about. We get those two coordinates that are basically a lat long, but they're not lat long, and then we use that to query each of the other layers. Is what we're doing for Utah. And I'm guessing that as we implement more states, Idaho, etc., we're going to find there's different ways of dealing with this primary key. So that's why we've tried to make it general, something that's configurable in the site metadata. And it'll probably be okay for the UDOT way of doing things. Yes, that's how we do it. We query the primary key, we get back that measured information, and then we use that as all of these other calls. It may be different in Idaho. We'll just have to see. Okay, so for the interface time, pardon me, go ahead.
I was just thinking the way that you structured some of this the stuff in the site metadata to be able to, I'm thinking, reach out in general terms to an API that contains spatial information. Some APIs you can pass in a lat long, and so for states like myself who aren't using roads and highways, there's still a lot of value to be able to maybe update those items like route information, functional class, urban, rural on a more automated basis, that we could use this, because right now it's a manual one-by-one process. So just thinking in terms of larger than roads and highways, how to expand that API use.
Yeah, and I mean, that was in my mind too, Christy. You know, there's that drop down that tells you basically the source for the information. And right now the source is either Jackalope roads and highways. Yeah, it would be nice if we had other sources out there, and maybe one is just some general source that you you configure the destination somehow in such a way that we can, maybe it's an Oracle table or something, and we can go and query that source automatically. I don't know, but I completely agree. I want this to be extensible for sure.
In Minnesota, we have some applications where it will return a result from a roads and highways set of information using a lat long. Some systems don't have route and measure in it to be that passover information. They just have lat long. So.
Yeah. I would love this to be like the general solution for how do we get information that's not where Jackalope is not the truth, the source of the information. Yep, we're on the same page, I think. Okay, so the timing is the problem that I'm presenting understandable to everybody? You've got that network freeze, and I'm pretty sure this is ubiquitous. I'm pretty sure everybody has to deal with this. This is the network that we're going to be working with, and then people, create their statistics and make sure, they attach it to that network. And maybe, the freeze is actually in the LRS itself. Maybe between these months, no one is allowed to make an LRS change, or they're, staged and not actually put into the active LRS. That freeze is handled different ways, but the problem is we don't want the network changing out from underneath the target that we're trying to aim for with regards to annual processing. So, Drew, if you can go to the next slide. The idea is we would create a new phase of annual, and actually the place we put it, which is 4.5, is pretty arbitrary. You could do this at any point, but the idea is that you would update the Jackalope site table using site splits based on the network status as of a certain date. So the workflow would be, people are doing all their work in roads and highways in 2019. And they passed that arbitrary date of January 1st. They're still making network changes. They're still adding functional classes and changing number of lanes and doing all the fun things that they do while you're trying to do annual processing against the 2019 network. What we're going to do is give you the ability to press a button and pick a date, which would probably be December 31st of 2019, and say, I want to create site splits for as of that date, based on the network as of that date. So the timing issue is people are doing all their 2019 changes. Okay, now we're into 2020. People are still making 2019 changes at this point because there's lag, and when you create something in roads and highways, you can assign it to a particular timeline, and so people might still be making 2019 changes through 2020. And maybe as of February 2020, people have said, okay, 2019 network looks good. You can press this button at that point, create site splits in Jackalope, which mirror what the network looked like on midnight, December 31st, 2019. And then that allows you, when you're doing annual processing, to have a stable network that you're working on. And so when you do HPMS, it's against the 2019 site splits, and it has the correct functional classes, correct number of lanes, and all that other fun stuff. And so that's the second timing issue, and this might be useful for other things other than end of year processing we talked about, but it should be a pretty easy way to manage that freeze issue. Okay. Oh, and this is a good example of what we're talking about. If you have some attribute, whether it's functional class or whatever, and it changes at some point in the year in 2010, or in this example, July 15th, 2010, that will create a site split. Let's say we changed road name from 1234 to 2345, or that's mile point, or who knows, let's make that mile point, 2345. Then after 2010 until some point in the future, someone made it 3.456 in 2021. So next year, 2021. What this process will do, it will create that black, I don't know if you could put your mouse there, Drew, but in the bottom, yes, right there. When you press 4.7 and you say December 31st, 2020, it's going to create a site split that freezes that 2, 3, 4, 5 as of that date, and then pushes the 3, 4, and then has that other site split for the rest of the information. Any questions on that? That's the last slide, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think that's all of us here. What's next? Well, as you can see, the proof of concept that Joe was working through, and Nicholas, thank you for your test environment. I mean, that's really helpful to be able for Joe to be able to make progress on that. And he's continuing to prototype and to figure out where some of the I gotchas are from a technical standpoint, in addition to Drew and I are running parallel with Joe and continuing our efforts to, and we'll drill out the add, update, and delete use cases, in addition to complete the cross-reference with Nicholas and Margaret for the cross-reference between your Jackalope site attributes to roads and highways. And I believe we're still looking at an anticipated timeline for the end of year 2020 to be able to complete the proof of concept and to complete some of our use case activities and to flesh out if there are more use cases that are there. And so this sort of gives you a picture that we'll continue to be working with Utah, Idaho, Nevada, Wyoming. Chad, as you're coming on board, and Christy and Darren, we're keeping Minnesota in the loop because they're very interested in jumping back in. So that gives us a picture and 10 minutes to be able to field any additional questions.
I don't know about interested, but you gotta be able to
Hey,
say
you
why
can
we left.
these meetings, Christy. You can't hide it. You're all about this.
I have a vested interest in keeping all of you sane when you did this, and I really hope you can learn from the pain that it caused us, and that it'll improve Esri's product. So, no.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty excited about this. I think I mean, I agree it's going to be cool for roads and highways. I think it's going to be a really great solution. But I completely agree with you, Christy. I think this is just step one. I think once we get it for roads and highways, we could, do this for, maybe help out, doing Kentucky's XOR stuff, having a common way where any point where Jackalope needs to get information from another source, we can use this site metadata mechanism to manage that. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
I don't think there's any more questions. I think we're good.